little segment today. Um, we are all here because we care about people, we care about kids, and so thank you for all that you do every day and for joining us. I'm going to talk today about characteristics of children's grief, also going to touch on what does grief look like at various ages for kids and teens, and some conversation about how to talk with and support grieving children and teens. So I will try to share my PowerPoint now. How it goes. Okay, hoping that everybody can see that. Yeah, it's good. Okay. All right. So slide. All right. So I am the program director at Ellie's Place in Ann Arbor. And as you may know, we provide peer support groups for kids and teens ages 3 through 18 who have experienced the death of someone close to them. Some people think it's only for parent or siblings, but actually we support kids or teens who have experienced any type of death. And we use a lot of different activities to help them share. We offer groups at our centers. We have 4 now in Ann Arbor, Flint, Grand Rapids, and Lansing, as well as some school-based groups and clinical consultations. So some support for the community, individuals, families, and professionals related to grief. Basic premises of our work. Just wanted to start here a little bit just to share kind of how we think about our work. We think about grief as a normal reaction to any kind of loss. So something that is expected and that we all go through. Grief is unique to each person. So although there are definitely some commonalities and some things that folks experience across the board, very, very unique to each person. We also don't think that it progresses in any kind of orderly stage. So those kind of 5 stages of grief that many of us learned years ago in school, they don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you reach acceptance and you're done. But instead, they kind of bounce all over the place and more like a spiral or like a kind of roller coaster. And we also believe that every person has the capacity to heal given some support. Loss is common. So in Michigan, this is a statistic from Judy's House out in Colorado, and they do stats on the whole country by state and by the nation. 1 in 13 children in Michigan will experience the death of a parent or sibling by age 18. So that's big. That's, in most classrooms, probably a couple of kids will experience the death of a parent or sibling. So that obviously doesn't take into account on aunts or uncles or best friends or grandparents. So it's very, very common childhood bereavement. And about 90% of people will experience the death of someone close to them by the time they're 20. So again, very common. Let's see. So in terms of characteristics of children's grief, we know that kids really can't understand the permanence of death until the age of 8 or 9. So they may be able to verbalize, that grandma died or mom died, but they don't necessarily know that that's a permanent thing. So we hear kids that say things like, I know grandma died, but will she be at my birthday party? And that can be frustrating and hard for the parent or the caregiver to have to continually answer those questions or revisit that. Um, but that's just until they reach that stage in their brain development, they will probably need to continue to ask. Also know that kids have a short sadness span. So they will see kids who, maybe are talking about they feel sad or nervous or worried or whatever it is, missing their person, and then they kind of skip off and go play. And that can be really confusing. And sometimes parents think, oh, they're not grieving or they don't understand. But really, it's just kind of they need to do that kind of approach avoid, can only sit with that emotional pain for a few minutes and then they need to kind of go play and do other things. And then often we'll come back with more questions. So I think as adults, we can sit kind of for hours and, process and talk through things. And we're really good at that, or many people are really good at that. But kids tend to grieve in just little chunks. Um, Kids are likely to blame themselves. So we know that kids are pretty egocentric and kind of the world revolves around them, especially the little ones. So if they maybe said or did something, and then the person died, that they would feel like that's their fault, that somehow they made that happen. Um, I know we had a story at Ellie's place where um, this little guy was going off to school, and his grandma, who lived with them, she was sick, and she asked for a hug before he left for school, and he was in a hurry, so he just kind of like, I can't, I gotta go. Well, grandma died while he was at school, and then he carried this guilt for a really long time, feeling like if I had only taken the time to stop and give her a hug, she would still be alive. And practically that doesn't make sense, but for this little one, he carried that guilt and that worry for a long time. Um, we know that kids have a limited ability to verbalize their feelings. So, especially the little ones, they kind of know mad, sad, glad, and that's kind of where they start. And so, we try to work with kids to kind of expand that feelings vocabulary and to help them learn some other things that they can do to talk about different kinds of words. Maybe it's frustrated or um, mad or confused or surprised, all those things. Finding ways through activities typically to learn some other words. And also, we know that kids don't like to be different from their peers. A lot of kids that we work with tell us that they don't like people to know that their dad died or whoever it is that died because they get treated differently. So, bereavement and having somebody who died, moving through the world, you feel different and you feel like everyone's looking at you, and that's hard. That a lot of times kids want to fit in and they want to be like everybody, so this can make them feel really, really different. Similar to having limited language around feelings, most kids have pretty limited coping skills. So that's our job as parents and professionals, is to help them develop some new strategies that they can do when they're having a difficult day, when they're feeling angry or confused or worried or whatever it is. So helping to build up those skills a little bit. Um, we also know that kids look to us as adults to model grief expression. So a lot of times, folks tell us like, "Oh, I need to be strong for my kids," or I can't let them see me cry, or I need to keep it together when I'm around my kids, so they know they can count on me." Um, and that's wonderful, and it makes sense that we do want to protect the kiddos and the little ones around us, but also they're looking to us, so they want to know if they see us cry, that maybe gives them permission that it's okay to cry or to talk about their feelings or to practice self-care, right? To take some time and get good rest and eat healthy food and drink water and stay hydrated and all that. So they're looking at us all the time. We know that kids will need to revisit their grief developmentally. So when they are young and somebody dies and they don't really understand the permanence, later down the road, and when they do understand that, they may need to come back and kind of process again, or ask more questions, or talk differently. Um, at Ellie's place, we sometimes even have kids that come back. Maybe they come when they're younger, and then they end their participation and move on from Ellie's place, and then they have some kind of a trigger or life event, or maybe just make sense of the loss in a different way, and ask to come back, and maybe come back for a while. So, and that's perfectly fine, and it makes sense that they have to ask different questions when they have a different kind of understanding. Okay. Developmentally, very often we hear folks that think the little ones don't understand um, grief, or that somebody has died. But we think about when there's a baby in the room and mom or dad leave the room. and the baby starts to cry. And they're crying. Why? They're crying because they notice that their caregiver is gone. So if a baby is crying when mom or dad leaves the room for just a couple minutes, imagine that sense of loss when they don't come back. So they do feel that, they do feel that absence and that loss, and often even for the little babies and the down to the toddlers, see changes in sleeping and eating and fussiness, and just kind of those are the biggest behavior changes. Also, really picking up the feelings and around that are around them. So other folks in the house who are feeling upset, kids can really pick that up. Ages 2 to 5, you can see on here, really limited awareness of death. They think that death is reversible. So sometimes, for folks who share that the person who died went to heaven, little ones might think that's a place, like they can go there and then come back. Or can I go see grandma in heaven and come back? They either think it's reversible or just think it's a place that they go to. Kids don't typically, little ones think that death will happen to them. Most little ones don't know somebody young who has died. Um, Again, that magical thinking that whatever they did could have caused it. Lots of repetition, lots of repeating the same information to help them process, and then that fear of abandonment. So when kids do experience the death of someone close to them, a lot of worries about, who else is going to die? Is this going to happen again? If mom died, then they might worry, is dad also going to die? So suddenly that's their reality. And so, um, that's for the little ones. And a little bit older, they're starting to understand, ages 6 and 8, that death might be permanent. Some kids, come to that a little bit sooner than others, still have those limited coping skills. They may not show their grief outwardly. So again, this is kiddos not wanting to be different. So they may hold on to their feelings. They might not want to talk about the feelings around the death or missing their person, but often we'll see it with behavior. So you might see kids who are acting out or um, misbehaving, and that sometimes is a way for folks around them to see that they're struggling a little bit. Regression is really common at this age, maybe needing to be closer to their caregiver, not wanting to be alone, um, fears or worries about their own health, that the guilt and anger, all kinds of, often we see a lot of, this is in our early elementary group, behavior challenges. A lot of our calls come from folks with kiddos in this age group that are just kind of bouncing off the walls and acting really different, and they don't necessarily know if it's related to the grief or not, but because the kids don't have the language necessarily to talk about their loss, they can show it in their behavior. Starting around age 9, kids can start to understand that death is final. Um, Kids this age is kind of upper elementary, moving into middle school. Again, don't want to be different, may not want to talk about this with their peers, may not want to show their feelings, kind of starting to control their feelings and how they move through the world in different ways. Sometimes at this age, kids focus on the scary details around the death, and this can be really disturbing or troubling for some folks. Um, Whether it was a car accident or if the child witnessed the death or after the death, they want to talk about that over and over, and sometimes that seems upsetting to people. But developmentally, it makes sense. They're kind of trying to make sense of it themselves. More somatic complaints at this age. So kids may be having stomach aches and headaches after they've experienced a death. A lot of anger outbursts are pretty common at this age as well. Okay. Then moving into kind of later middle school and high school, a lot more moving towards independence, being more connected with peers than maybe the parents, maybe starting to step away a little bit from family and looking more to peers. Maybe don't want to ask for help. We take a fair amount of calls from parents or guardians who say, I know my child, my teen needs help, but they don't want to come. So we work with them a lot on how to overcome that hesitation and help them feel safe in entering a group setting when they don't want to be kind of out there or put on display. A lot of teens have that sense of invincibility, so we might see more risk-taking behavior at this age. Might see kids after a death who are perhaps, if they're driving age, driving fast or experimenting with substances, maybe sexual acting out, just kind of more risk-taking. Um, they definitely at this age understand that death is final and that everyone is going to die. Another thing we hear from kids in this age group is that kind of spiritual questioning. So, if they have been raised in a faith or a religion, they may want to turn their back on that and really um, question God or the fairness of in the world. Other kids might move closer to that spirituality or religion. So really, really different. But this can be also troubling to folks around them that um, kind of, especially if they're stepping away from spirituality that's been a comfort in the past, that can cause some concern. That is kind of what we might see. Um, when we look at factors that surround or affect bereavement, these are some of them. In terms of age, the younger kiddos, again, will have a different understanding about the permanency of death, whereas older kids will be able to understand that. Personality, some of us just tend to be more resilient and more flexible. Some of us may be more sensitive. So based on whatever personality that kids bring, you may see different kinds of responses. Um, Coping skills, some kids have pretty good strategies to manage and ability to talk through things or ask for help, and others may not. So those with less coping skills might struggle a little bit more. Um, Kids with a history of other difficulties, maybe prior losses or other traumatic events in their lives, could perhaps compound how they deal with a death or a loss, um, can magnify that loss. Support from family, friends, or the community. Those can be very protective for kids and teens that have good support. That can be really helpful. And for those that feel more isolated or don't have really strong social connections, could perhaps struggle a little bit more. Type of death, if it is a more prolonged illness or there's been time to kind of process and talk through and say goodbye is one thing. And then if it's a more sudden or traumatic death, that's a different kind of reaction. Neither one is necessarily easier or harder. It's just can look a little bit different. And then finally, the relationship with the person who died. If it was a very close relationship, you might see kids react in certain ways. And if it was more conflicted or maybe estranged relationship, that can complicate or cause different kinds of reactions as well. So when we're talking with a kid or with a family, we kind of think about all of these things when we're looking at what kind of support might be helpful. Okay, so for providing support to a grieving person, and this is for kids, teens, adults, for everybody, really the most important thing is to show up, right? To be there, to be present, to be authentic, to be yourself. Um, it's challenging these days with COVID, with the pandemic. We can't just knock on somebody's door and sit on the couch with them um, after they've experienced a death. We just don't have that ability right now, but you can still call, you can text, you can FaceTime, um, send a card, send a note, whatever it is, call on the phone, all those things. But really, just be there. That's the most important. Um, we want to listen more and talk less when we're sitting with somebody who has experienced a death. Really being there, sitting with them, listening to them, asking questions, inviting stories, allowing silence. I think that that can feel uncomfortable and awkward sometimes, but it also can feel really comforting and supportive for somebody to just have you there, um, to sit with them or be with them on the phone or whatever. Um, I think particularly when it's a child who's struggling, we want to kind of swoop in and scoop them up and give them a hug and make it all better and cheer them up and fix it. And we know that when someone has died, that's not something that we can fix. So cheering someone up after a death um, can feel not helpful. Um, that I think that is an instinct, especially when you have somebody that's having a hard time to want to fix them. But we know that grief is not something that you can fix. That you learn to live with it, you acclimate to it, but you can't take it away. So that can be a challenge for us. Um, Reflective listening can really help in terms of allowing for emotional expression, that inviting kids to say more, as simply as, would you like to say more? When they are sharing something with you, to try to key into that feeling and reflect that back to them. So if somebody is a child is really angry and throwing something, to say, "Wow, I can see you're really mad right now," and kind of trying to be there with them and reflect that, pick up on the feelings, pick up on the emotion, and encourage and allow that. Um, Sometimes we hear that a child is feeling angry and expressing it, and then the grown up or the person around them says, "Oh, don't feel that way," or you don't feel sad, cheer up, and then that just makes kids feel like whatever they're experiencing is not right, that they're doing it wrong. So really showing that empathy and being present in their pain and in their sadness can really help them. We can't know how someone is feeling until they tell us. So asking questions of a child um, can be really helpful, and just being there again for them. What else? It can be really hard to hear emotions, especially those emotions that are very, very strong or powerful, can feel scary and can feel hard to hear, but are important to invite. This quote, um, you all are professionals, you probably are familiar with the book, It's Okay That You're Not Okay by Megan Devine. It's a wonderful book that really just is talks a lot about allowing people to be where they are and not expecting them to be any certain place with their grief. So this quote is, I think, really beautiful. Acknowledgement is the best medicine we have. It doesn't seem like it should do anything, but when somebody is in pain and you look at them and you say, "I see you," that's medicine. Mm, okay, so how to talk with children and teens about death. So the first one here, being as honest as possible and tell the truth even when it's hard. So we really encourage honesty with kids and teens of all ages. So even when it is a death that maybe was stigmatized or had some kind of challenge to it, that we really encourage that truth telling. Um, I heard years ago a talk from a woman from the Dougie Center, who is one of the, I think, the original Children's Grief Center out in Oregon. And she tells the story. She said, in 30 years, I've never had a child tell me I wish they had lied to me. But over those years, I've had so many children say, I wish that I had been told the truth. So one example that we have is we had a kiddo that came to us and knew that his mother died from, he didn't know how. He was told that it was an accident. And then years later was out and about and was talking with a child, and another child said, well, at least my mom didn't kill herself. And he said, my mom didn't kill herself. And then got, really upset, but then went home and talked with the family and found out that is what happened. So he got very upset and got upset with his family and all the people around him because they were not honest with him. So he had grieved the loss of his mom who died in an accident, and now he had to go back and not only re-grieve and reprocess um, what happened with his mom, but he also had to then work through his relationship with all the people around him who he then had trust issues that he felt like they weren't honest with me about this. What else have they not been honest with me about? So we really encourage that. Start as simply as you can, use age appropriate language, really, really simple words. Um, and that could be really hard. And we do have tip sheets, and we're happy to talk with folks about how to find the right language. But we find that kids who are told the truth about the cause of death or what happened early on, that becomes their reality. And as they grow up and move through the world with that reality, they can understand it more over time, but tend to appreciate having that information. So starting then with simple, concrete, age-appropriate language for little kids, keeping those phrases really, really short and using simpler language. Um, and then here it says giving too much information or too many details can be overwhelming. So sometimes starting with, you know, what do you know? What do you already know about what happened with your grandma? And then kind of assess that's helpful in assessing what they know. And then you can also correct anything that is not accurate at that time, and also help them to understand by adding details over time. So we think about layering information. So start really, really simple. And then sometimes we ask, would you like to hear more? Um, and then the child can say, yes, I want more, or no, I'm not ready. And sometimes they'll say nope, and then they'll go off and play. Um, then really important, I think, to follow up by inviting questions. So all of these things kind of build upon each other. So you're starting with really, really simple language, and then layering information over time, coming back later and just saying like, I'm here. Whenever you have questions, please feel free to come back. So bringing it up over time too can be really helpful to help them feel safe. It is always okay to say, I don't know. Actually, I think it's important in a lot of ways to say that because we don't have all the answers. And that also gives them permission to be okay with not knowing things. Um, you want to reassure them of their safety as honestly as you can. You can't obviously promise that, for example, nobody else in their world is going to die. A lot of times when kids have experienced a death, that's their biggest worry. What else is going to happen? Um, so reassuring them to the best of your degree, the best of your ability is really important. Again, reflecting and normalizing feelings. Kids often feel that there's something wrong with them if they feel angry or confused or worried. So helping them to know that it makes sense that you're feeling that way. You've had something really, really big happen in your life. Um, and then you're kind of laying the groundwork for not a one-time conversation, but the beginning of a lifelong discussion. So the more that we're able to be present and um, reflect those feelings, so that they can feel safe in in sharing and asking questions. Okay. Um, this we are asked about all the time about. Well, let me say this. One of the activities that we do at Ellie's Place is called Walking in My Grief Filled Shoes. And for that activity, we invite kids when we're in person to take construction paper and trace around their foot. And then on one side, they write things that happened after the death that were helpful to them, things that people said or did that were helpful. And then on the flip side, they write things that were not helpful or were hurtful. And it's actually really interesting when again, when we're in person, to go up to the chalkboard or whiteboard and write some of those things down. And we often find that there are some of the things that kids find helpful on one side, other kids find not at all helpful, and then some of them are kind of in the middle. So these are sort of more universal things that we've heard from folks that are typically not helpful. So we may, after someone is sharing about a death, want to say, I know just what you're going through. We all probably have experienced some type of death or loss, and we might feel like we know what that feels like, but we can never know exactly how somebody is feeling in that moment. So instead of saying that, try, can you tell me more what this has been like for you? So that's inviting them to share their exact experience in this moment. And then that allows you to move on from that conversation and build on it. Um, this second one is along the lines of wanting to fix or take away or help somebody feel better when they may be sharing about their experience, the death that they experienced or the feelings that they're having. A lot of times people will say things like, it's important to remember the good things in life, or what happy memories do you have? Um, Sometimes those happy memories aren't there, that we don't know what kind of relationship they've had, where they've been, what their experience is. So instead of that, try asking, what kinds of memories do you have about your person who died? That again invites all of the memories to be shared, and kind of walking alongside a child or a teen in those feelings and helping them to feel like it's safe for them to share all the memories. I think a lot of times they feel like it's not okay to say the things that they didn't like about the person. Sometimes that's a really important conversation, is, are there any things you don't miss? That allowing or inviting those conversations don't happen all the time, but can be really helpful and really healing. Sometimes we want to relate to a child by sharing something that happened to us. Um, Perhaps a child who has had a parent die you may have had an experience where you had a parent die or parents died around the same age. And as a way to connect and relate, that feels like a good thing to say. But instead, it is taking the focus from them to you. So staying present with them and thinking in your own head, what were the thoughts and feelings that you may have had and experiences when you had your own personal loss. Invite them to say, tell me more what this has been like for you. So again, their journey and their experience is different than yours, than ours. So inviting them to share and talk about their journey. Um, Another way that we often want to take away the pain is saying, especially if it's somebody who maybe suffered or struggled in their life with health or mental health or whatever illness, to say he's in a better place. And that feels like it's comforting that their pain is gone and they're in a better place. What we hear is, no, the best place for that for my person is right here next to me, and they're not in a better place because they're not with me. And so instead, reflecting on that, I can imagine how much you miss him. I can imagine how hard it is without him, and then that allows them to share that piece and to talk a little bit more. Gosh, when somebody dies, everybody around us has a lot of advice. So you should do this. You need to do this. You have to do this. Why don't you do this? Um, Folks with advice just come out of the woodwork, and that can feel like people don't know what you're going through, but they're trying to tell you what to do. They don't know what you've tried or what you haven't tried, what you're experiencing. So instead, try, you know yourself best. So giving permission for folks to behave and grieve and take care of themselves and do whatever it is that they need to do, really validating that you know yourself. Or ask what feels right to you. That sometimes people will say, you know, well, I really want to hold on to all these possessions, but people are telling me I should get rid of them. To ask that question, like, well, what feels right to you? Does that feel like the right time? Does it feel like the right move? Or and then kind of validating and allowing and inviting them to do what makes sense on their timeline. Um, we hear this one a lot too. Oh, your mom wouldn't want you to be sad. Cheer up. She wouldn't want you to feel so sad or cry all the time. But instead, that permission. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. That sometimes for kids and for teens and adults actually, um, to have somebody validate and say, you need to be exactly where you are, feel what you're feeling. Um, However you need to feel is valid and is real and is important. So not trying to take that away, but actually validating people's experience. Um, with with all of these statements and suggestions for how to provide support or interact, sometimes we worry that we're going to say the wrong thing or say it in the wrong way or offend somebody. But what we hear from folks is that um, they'd rather you don't say nothing, that you just say something like, I don't know what to say, but I'm here for you. I'm here to listen. So a lot of people, because they don't know what to say or they worry about saying the wrong thing, don't say anything at all. Don't call, don't show up, don't ask about the person. Um, we hear from people that they love when others around them ask about their person that died. Invite stories or memories or ask questions or use their name. Um, a lot of people say, that folks around them don't want to bring up the death or don't want to bring up the person because they're afraid that they will make someone sad. But instead, we hear from people that they love that opportunity to talk about their person, that it helps them feel like their person was important to someone other than just them, that they mattered, that the fact that they were here, that they impacted others around them, can be so helpful and so healing. And families tell us that after about usually right around 3 months, people stop bringing it up or stop asking or stop talking about the person who died. So months down the line and even years down the line, bringing up the person's name and asking about them, or gosh, what would Bobby think about the pandemic, or how do you think Bobby would be managing this today? Just kind of invites them to reflect and keep that person present in their world. This last one is a big one that a lot of us, a lot of people in the world start statements with "at least," such as, well, at least you had him for 10 years, or at least you're young and you can have more children, or whatever the "at least" is, just serves to minimize the loss and minimizes their experience and their situation. So that is one that we like to share with folks, that it feels like that's the right thing to do, is to try to help them feel better, but that at least can be really not helpful.
Peggy, I did just want to jump on here really quick. Our 5-minute queue is about to come up, so I'm just oh, there it is. I just wanted to let you know, keep an eye on the time. We do have about 5 minutes left. So, oh, perfect timing.
So I would love to take any questions, or if there are any in the chat, or if anybody would like to share any questions about anything I talked about or Ellie's place.
I thought of one question that just kind of came up for me was, as far as working with, as professionals, we're working with the parents oftentimes as well as the children. Do you have any tips for kind of, I don't know, like bridging that gap between maybe how their expectations of how their children should be grieving and how we can kind of work with the parents to make sure we're on the same page?
Yeah, of course. This actually came up recently for us, that one of the dads that we work with said that he's really struggles because everyone in his family is grieving so differently. So he, and then each of the children, and then all the people. So really the best thing to do is pay attention and ask questions, like to really just key in and try to respond to what is happening and how it unfolds. And that's to be expected, that we're all different people and we all experience, and we all had different relationships with the person who died.
Okay, thank you.
I see Amy.
Hi, Peggy. Yes, I wanted to say hi. We've met, but it's been a little while. And so thanks. I always enjoy being able to hear anybody that's speaking from Ellie's place. It's always an important organization that I like to have families be aware of, because I know you guys do tremendous work with families. And I guess more of a question about your new location and your new building. I'm wondering that as hopefully the few months here go by and we have more herd immunity, if you've been talking about bringing on-site programming back to Ann Arbor.
Yes. For those that don't know, we built a big, beautiful center in Ann Arbor off of State Street that we were in for about 6 months before the pandemic hit. So that is very unfortunate that we're not able to use this space that was crafted and designed specifically for our purpose. But yes, we will be back as soon as it's safe to do so. We're really looking forward to folks getting the vaccine and being able to start. We will start eventually. We'll definitely be continuing virtual groups through this program year, so through May. We hope to be able to do some on-site something in the summer, perhaps. It will be, smaller and physically distanced and masked and safe and all that stuff. But we will probably be starting with reduced capacity groups, hopefully by fall. Yeah, everything we're doing right now is on Zoom and virtual. Thank you for asking.
I did get a question through the chat. So someone would like to know.
Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I have one through the chat. What is the best way to help parents and family members understand that laughing and enjoying soon after death is not a bad thing?
Yes. What is the best way? I think to validate it, and just to validate and understand that kids especially need to move through that, kind of approach avoid, that they can feel sad for a little bit and then they need to go play, and that play is really how kids process and how they come to understand grief and feelings. So sometimes the playing is actually working through some things. Physical activity can get a lot of feelings out, so that's helpful too. But also we want kids to live on and be kids. So we do encourage that running, jumping, and playing and being kids, and then also inviting the sharing. Any other questions?
I know we have 60 seconds, more of a quick comment. Hi, I'm turning my camera on. It's Kelly, a neurosurgery PA from Akron Children's in Ohio. I just kind of reflect with COVID, we haven't been able to have some of the connections with some of our families, and especially sibs of kids, right? And so I think it'll be interesting as we sort of transition back to school, as we're starting to do for some schools down here, where those kids are in their coping, right, over the last year, because all these wonderful programs like your program in child life support, we haven't really been able to do because they're not allowed into the hospital. So there's an interesting reflection.